Hi guys, welcome to video lecture number 3, Lunar Phases. In this video we're going to explore why the moon appears to change its shape in the sky. People have been measuring the passing of time by observing the cycles created by the motion of the Earth, the moon, and the sun since the dawn of time. Just as the Earth's revolution around the sun is used to determine one calendar year, or the rotation period of the Earth determines one day, the moon appears to change shape in a repeated pattern over the course of about 1 month. Go ahead and pause the video and record the essential question in your notes. If you were to look into the night sky when the moon is out for a whole month and draw the moon as it appears on a calendar, your observations would look like this calendar to the right. These images represent the lunar phases as they were seen in the month of November in 2013. Notice that the new moon, or the beginning of the lunar cycle, is labeled on Saturday, November 2nd, and the full moon, the halfway mark of the lunar cycle, is labeled on Sunday, November 17th. During the first half of the lunar cycle, the moon is not visible at all, and then it slowly grows larger, appearing on the right-hand side until it becomes fully visible. Think of it as kind of like a face that slowly turns towards you. During this part of the lunar cycle, the moon is said to be waxing because it appears to be getting bigger and bigger. You might wonder what the word waxing has to do with getting bigger, and I don't blame you because the word comes from a very different time period. Take a look at this picture on the left. Back in the day, candles used to be made by tying a bunch of strings to a structure that sort of looks like a ladder, but it was on its side so that the strings hang down. Then the strings were dipped into a big pot of melting wax and then pulled out. Have you ever put your finger into hot wax? What happens when you pull it out? The wax hardens, right? Well, the same is true for the wax on the strings. It hardened as they pulled it out of the big pot of wax. Then the strings were dipped again, and a new layer of wax was added. If you repeat this enough times and add enough layers of wax, the wax around the strings slowly gets bigger and bigger, until voila, you have a candle. That's why the moon is said to be waxing during the first half of the lunar cycle. It slowly grows bigger and bigger until it's full. After the full moon, look at the calendar. The moon slowly gets smaller and smaller. Now it's visible on the left-hand side instead of the right, until it appears to disappear again. During the second half of the lunar cycle, the moon is said to be waning, which means that it's getting smaller. If someone ever says, "You're waning away," what they mean is that you're getting super thin, like the moon is in the second half of the cycle. Just remember, when the moon is waxing, it's the beginning of the lunar cycle. The moon is getting bigger, and you see it on the right-hand side. When it's waning, it's the second half of the lunar cycle. The moon is getting smaller, and it appears to be on the left-hand side. So far, we've just stated that the moon appears to get larger and smaller over about the course of 1 month, but we haven't tried to explain why, which is what our essential question is. To do that, we'll have to take a look at the Earth, moon, and the sun from space. When you're trying to describe what you see in space, it's tricky, because we're looking out from a planet that rotates on its axis every 24 hours while we revolve around the sun. Everything in space is moving, and that can make it hard to explain why we're seeing what we're seeing from the Earth. That's why so many ancient civilizations believed that the sun revolved around the Earth. It was the simplest conclusion that they could find to explain the rising and the setting sun. So, why does the moon appear to change its shape? The short answer is that it's a matter of our perspective from the Earth. Take a look at the illustration at the bottom of the screen. If we could observe the moon orbiting the Earth from a spaceship way out in space, we would see something like this. I haven't mentioned this yet, and most of you probably already know this, but the moon doesn't shine. What I mean is, unlike the sun, it doesn't produce any of its own light. The moonlight you can see during a full moon is really just the reflection of the sun's light falling on the moon. Look at the image at the bottom of the screen again. Just like the Earth, half of the moon is always illuminated by the sun. The side of the moon facing the sun is illuminated or lit up, and the side of the moon facing away from the sun is in darkness. The changing shapes of the moon are just the portion of the illuminated moon that we can see from the Earth. Take a look at the moon at position 1 down here. Half of the moon is lit up, but if you're looking at the moon from the Earth, all that you can see of the moon is the dark half. That's why a new moon looks like this over here. The illuminated side of the moon isn't visible at all. No reflected light can be seen. At position 2, the moon has revolved, just like everything else we've studied, counterclockwise around the Earth. Half of the moon is still illuminated, but from the Earth, all we can see is a tiny sliver of the illuminated half, and we see it on the right-hand side. Our perspective makes the moon appear to be a crescent shape like this. Since the entire lunar cycle takes about 28 days, position 3 represents day 7 of the lunar cycle, 1/4 of the total revolution of the moon around the Earth. Half of the moon is still illuminated, and our perspective makes the moon look like this. This is called a first quarter moon because the moon has completed the first quarter of its orbit around the Earth. At position 4, we can see most of the illuminated half of the moon. The result is this bulging shape. It's called a gibbous moon. Gibbous means bulging out. The only portion of the side of the moon that is in darkness that we can still see at this point is now this little crescent shape. At position 5, the moon is halfway through its revolution around the sun, and all we can see is the moon's illuminated half, making it a full moon. Position 1 through 5 represent the waxing phases of the moon. After the full moon, the cycle repeats itself, but in reverse. The moon is seen as a waning gibbous moon at position 6. It's a last or third quarter moon at 7 because it's 3/4 through its revolution, and as a waning crescent at position 8. Positions 5 through 8 represent the waning phases of the moon because our perspective from the Earth causes us to see less and less of the illuminated side of the moon. It appears to shrink. One last important note. You can always tell whether the moon is waxing or waning. Just ask yourself, does the moon appear to be lit up on the right or the left-hand side? Right is waxing, but if it's lit up on the left side, it's a waning moon. Next time you see the moon, try to figure out where it is in its orbit around the Earth. Don't worry, we're going to model this in class as well. It takes a lot to figure out what it is that we're seeing from the Earth in order to understand the shapes that you see in the sky. Thanks for watching.